The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me, and hopefully you can all see my screen. My name is David Rawl. I'm the Chief Technical Officer here at Bytes Security Partnerships, and I'm here to introduce this GDPR webinar that we are doing this morning. So the rough agenda that we're going to go through, do a little bit of housekeeping first. We'll talk about who we are, what we do. We'll talk about GDPR. Just a little bit of the kind of conversations that we're having with customers and the issues that we're seeing, and then I will hand over to William Priestley from Varonis, which is the actual reason you're all here on this webinar, hopefully, because my stuff's all pretty dull, and those of you that know me will have probably heard it all before anyway. So I will try and keep it as concise as I can. You're all on mute, all those of you who are connected, but if you want to ask any questions through the question box or do the chat thing or any of that kind of stuff throughout the webinar, please feel free. We'll deal with the questions at the end of the session, so please just type them as they come to mind as they come through. What we'll do at the end of the session is I'll then work through those questions with William, and we'll address them directly at that point. We're not here to discuss commercials on this session. We won't be discussing pricing. We will not be discussing commercials, contract durations, anything like that. That will all be followed up by the Bytes Security Partnerships account managers after the session, if any of you have any questions around that. We will make a recording available at the end, and there will also be a feedback survey at the end once I close it down. So if you could connect and fill that in for us, that'd be great, because it enables us to improve these sessions for the future. Who are we? Well, we are Bytes Security Partnerships. We're part of the Bytes Technology Group UK, which consists of two companies, ourselves and Bytes Software Services. Bytes Software Services are the largest Microsoft cloud reseller in the UK, alternate between the first and second Microsoft LA in the UK, so conventional licensing, open license agreements, all that kind of stuff. We are Security Partnerships. We were the second biggest checkpoint partner by volume in the UK last year. We are a 4-star elite partner. We are one of only the only 4-star elite partner to retain their status in the UK. But beyond that, we are an independent security VAR. We deal with numerous different vendors. We have top-tier relationships with all of those vendors, and as you can see on the screen, this is kind of the range of services that we offer. And what we tend to try and do is always work with a genuine best-of-breed vendor wherever possible, and also have a backup 1 or 2 vendors so that we can make sure that we can offer our customers the right level of choice should they have any particular wrinkles that specific vendor doesn't deal with. You know, the general areas that we deal in are the same as all the security VARs, to be honest, so network content, data security, application security, etc., etc., etc. GDPR is an interesting topic because it really spans a lot of these areas in terms of how you do it. You know, if you've got no network visibility anomaly detection or SIM, can you do GDPR properly? Well, arguably not. If you've got no data security, no data classification, data visibility, can you do GDPR? No, you can't. You know, if you've got no access and authentication set up, how do you know who's accessing the data and touching the data? Again, you know, arguably you can't. So GDPR spans an awful lot of these areas, and I think that's where a lot of people are really struggling with the GDPR. And that's one of the things, obviously, we're going to talk about today. What we offer, I'll just spin this up. The thing that's really special about what we do is the in-house direct escalation engineer support. There are a lot of IT security resellers out there, you all know that, but we actually have third-line engineers in-house answering the phone, which means the most likely scenario you're going to get when you call in to log a ticket with this is, well, let's do a remote session and look at that. You're not going to get scripts. You're not going to get, I'll escalate that, we'll get back to you in 4 hours. You actually get to talk to people and get stuff fixed there and then. On top of that, you know, we do quarterly review meetings, our account managers do quarterly review meetings, etc., etc., etc. You know, so there's a lot of very good stuff we do, but it's the in-house support that I really think marks us out, and also the way the account managers know the product. You know, they're not just salespeople, they're account managers and product specialists, and I think that's quite special in the marketplace. This morning's webinar is to discuss GDPR, and I'm just going to share a slide with you. We ran a very large event about week 10 days ago in London. Some of you may well have actually attended. And one of the questions we asked at the very, very start of it is why people were there. And I think we were very surprised just to see how many people were there from a basis of we know we need to do something, but we don't know what it is. And you know, even people who think, you know, we think we have a plan. So we had, you know, the bulk of people who were there either know they need to do something about GDPR or think they might have a plan but want to start talking about people. And I think I was both surprised and not surprised. For me, I think a lot of businesses are in this position. Our lead talker at that event, who's been talking about GDPR for probably the last 2 years, was very surprised with this outcome. He felt everybody would know what they were doing and they were just there to talk product. But I think there's a lot of people out there that just don't know what they're going to do about GDPR at the moment. And hopefully today in this webinar will start you on a road of at least having some ideas. Why is GDPR a game changer? Well, I mean, it builds and reinforces the Data Protection Act that we've had in the UK and in Europe for a while. The thing about it is that A, Brexit makes no difference. European GDPR, if we want to exchange data with Europe, we have to apply to it. Even if we decide that we don't want to apply it to UK data, if we want to hold European data or touch European data, etc., etc., and I know William will go through this in a lot more detail, we have to apply to it whether we decide we want to or not. And as a result of that, the fines for a breach of that data, you know, anywhere up to 4% if you really haven't done anything about it. So if you just shut your eyes, stick your head in a bucket of sand and don't do anything about GDPR, you know, 4% of global turnover. If you're a manufacturing house, if you're a logistics house, you know, the kind of margins you operate at, a 4% of global turnover fine could literally be cataclysmic. It could be cataclysmic for your business. So this is a really big issue and a really serious problem. And it isn't just an IT problem. This needs to be dealt with by the business as a whole. Everybody has to work together to solve this. There needs to be a senior person within the business to oversee and deal with this. And whatever job description you want to put in a data protection officer, whatever kind of job description you want to put around that, there needs to be somebody who's going to coordinate this and deal with this and move it forward. It is too important to not. You know, consent and right to be forgotten. You know, the people's consent for you to use their data, the right to be forgotten once they know that you've got their data, all key parts of it. And you know, unless you know where that data is, unless you know who has access to it, unless you know where it's been, where it's gone, how can you do that? How can you use it appropriately? These are all really important points of GDPR. And it is a journey. There is no one single bullet around GDPR. However, what I can tell you, the D in GDPR stands for data, right? And unless you know where your data is, who has access to it, what is normal usage of it, and what is anomalous usage of it, and where it is going, you don't stand a chance of being GDPR compliant or having even a plan for GDPR. You have to have control and knowledge of your data. And this is not just databases hooked up to websites. This is all of your data. And that's really where Varonis comes into its own, and where Varonis is a game changer for GDPR in terms of your ability to comply and work towards compliance. And with that, I will hand over to William to explain to you exactly how they do that. So William, hopefully you're there.
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction.
So I will make you presenter. There you go.
Thank you. I will do. Hopefully you can all see my screen now.
Yes, we can. Right, I'm going to mute out and leave you to it. Remember, everybody, if you want to put questions in the boxes, and we will take those at the end once Will has finished his presentation. I'll speak to you all later.
Fantastic. Okay, so thanks everyone. As you know, this is going to be a presentation around Varonis and GDPR and how we can help you detect, secure and govern your GDPR data where it resides in that 80% of your unstructured data assets, which is the unstructured data space. Just a quick introduction to who I am. My name is William Priestley. I'm a sales engineer here at Varonis, and I currently work with some of the largest customer accounts we have within the UK, although back when I started several years ago, I actually worked in the commercial space and up through enterprise. So I've worked with all sides of organizations and across a plethora of verticals as well. So if there's been some sort of data challenge or information security or governance challenge, I've probably seen it in some guise or another. So just a quick rough agenda of what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to introduce you to who we are in case any of you aren't aware of who Varonis are and what we do. I'm going to talk about what is GDPR and why do we need it. Talk more about what we do in more detail. So Varonis has a very successful operational methodology where we kind of help do a discovery piece to understand your data and then have a framework to help prevent any kind of regulatory breaches, data security breaches, and lock down your information, and then give you, again, that same framework to sustain that. So it's all the way through the early time to value of kind of securing your data straight away and understanding it very quickly, through that journey of locking it down, putting in the governance and best practices in place, and maintaining that and reporting on it as you go forward. I'm going to quickly then apply that to GDPR and how you can leverage that kind of framework and technology and operational methodology into ascertaining GDPR kind of compliance and understanding and evidencing that you've made every best effort you can do to be compliant. And then just quickly run through what happens in a data breach. For those of you who don't know, well, you'll understand that as I come to it, but what happens in a data breach and how you can detect it, and then we'll go on to any Q&A. I'll also be finishing off with a very, very short high-level demo of the detection, the locking it down, the alerting and everything with a demo box to just kind of give you that understanding of what it would look like with our solution in play. So about Varonis, we've been around for 12 years, so we are a very mature organization. We've been experts in data for a long time. We've worked very heavily in the governance piece. We're now working very heavily in information security. We have over 5,400, nearly 5,500 customers globally, and around 10% of those reside here in the UK. And what we do as a business is we help protect your data from insider and other cyber threats through sort of user behavioral analytics of user activity on your data, alerting in near real time to abusive access, and then also helping you put in the controls and policies in place to lock that data down and reduce the risk of such data breaches happening in the future, as well as evidencing your success at being compliant with whatever regulation or policies that you have. So what is the GDPR and why do we have it? Well, the GDPR is here to kind of address the modern computing paradigm. It's going to be replacing the outgoing Data Protection Directive, which was a European directive, so it's a guideline that was designed in the late 80s. So this was built back when computers were nothing more than glorified typewriters and calculators, so to speak. Since then, we've had a whole change in how computers are used. The internet happened, it's massive now. We now have, cloud hosting, big data analytics, the Internet of Things. More and more personal data is being collected to kind of target your services and offerings better, to target marketing better, to basically just connect things more and more in our day-to-day lives. And the Data Protection Directive just didn't have the framework in place to address data protection concerns with that in mind. Furthermore, every sovereign state has its own interpretation in terms of law. So what Europe really wanted to do was have a pan-European law that meant everyone was on the same playing field, because again, we live very international lives now. I could be a UK citizen living in France with my data being hosted in Germany. Which sovereign state's law around data protection would apply if my data was breached and I was a victim to some criminal activity through either my bank account being drained or my identity being stolen? So that's really why it's here and why it's come in. And just so you know, in the bottom left-hand corner, it is coming in the 25th of May 2018. So we don't have a lot of runway as businesses to get ready. You have 14 months, so to speak, before this is enshrined and active law. It's been finalized, but we still have some runway to get in law. And the less time you have to kind of prepare, the higher chances that you won't be ready in time for this to happen. So let's quickly cover what are the new requirements of this data protection regulation. Well, first of all, it takes into account two core principles in its underlying, what it was built from. And those principles are privacy by design for the data and accountability for design by the data. What that really means is, don't collect the data you don't need to if it's personal. Make sure it's collected only for a purpose it is. If it's fulfilled that purpose and it's stale and no longer required, delete it, get rid of it. Make sure that how that data is processed is constantly monitored, so full auditing of what's going on with that data, how it's being used, making sure that there's no abuse happening to it, preventing, making sure that only those that need access to that data do have access, and anyone else that doesn't, has no business, no job role responsible around that data, they should not have access. So it's, again, getting those access controls down. The accountability by design side is not a finger-pointing principle. It's really designed to breed good practices within the business. And this is, as David mentioned, this isn't an IT problem. This is a business problem. The business has to change its culture and embrace privacy by design as a business culture, embrace accountability by design as a business culture, and then have those technical frameworks in place on the IT infrastructure to enable that to actually happen and put some, put some teeth and meat behind those directives from the business. So accountability is around having data owners, data protection officers, making sure that people in the business have the information they need to make informed decisions around this data, and that they're the ones that can be, not held accountable, but can actually say, I've made this decision, and here are the reasons why, and here I'm going to evidence this to you, auditor, I'm compliant, everything's done. So there we go. Another thing businesses will have to do is you'll have to react to the rights that EU citizens can invoke, such as my right to be forgotten. Tell me, where is my data? I'm subject to access request. What data do you hold on me? Great, I have to respond to that. Okay, I want you to delete all data you hold on me. I don't want it there anymore. Okay, fine. I need to go find that and delete it. Again, it's around understanding your data assets. Coming down to next things is extraterritoriality. As David mentioned, Brexit won't affect anything, and to be honest, no matter where your business's headquarters are, it won't really affect anything. As long as you host EU citizen data or have some form of data of EU citizens somewhere, and chances are you will, like I said, we all live very international lives, GDPR will apply to your business. And two of the probably biggest headline-grabbing requirements and features of the new GDPR is you have to notify to the data protection authorities of a data breach within 72 hours and provide them with information around when the breach happened, what data was compromised, who could potentially be affected. All of this information you need to understand and provide, and that's a huge challenge if you don't actually understand what data you hold or who's accessing it or doing what with it. The other big scary thing are these huge fines being mentioned, like 4% of your global revenue, or if maybe a lesser fine of 2% if you've made some effort to be compliant. These huge fines are sort of something that, people are saying, it's just a big scare tactic, but there is a good reason why these big fines are here, and it's because us as businesses have not taken data protection seriously enough. We left to our own devices, we just focused on what was important to the business, we didn't care about people's rights, and more within the headlines we've seen there are more and more data breaches happening, bigger and bigger data breaches happening, and more citizens are having their personal data out in the internet for criminals to leverage and utilize at their expense. So these fines are here to make sure we get in line and take this issue seriously. So what does this really mean for us? Well, hopefully you've probably all read between the lines now, but it means we need to understand where is EU citizen personal data being stored, who has access to it, who should be accessing it. We need to be able to react to a data breach of that citizen data, and i.e. monitor all activity on it and be alert to abusive access to that data. Encourage controls, get that privacy by design in there to reduce the risk of and even the impact of a data breach, and also put in policies in place to make sure we have accountability and that people in the business know what's happening with that data and can make informed decisions around it. So, probably already said this, why is this regulation coming in? It's because data breaches are happening on a near month-by-month basis. Every other month you'll see a new data breach within the headlines. And insiders actually are cited as the most expensive source of a data breach at $144,000 per incident in 2005. That's a Verizon data article that they wrote. 71% of people have more access to information than they really need to, and that could be either through privilege aggregation. They've changed job roles. Maybe when they join the company, the IT clones their account from someone else who had excessive access, or it could be just through global access groups that reside there. 63% of businesses know that they don't really have a mature method of tracking access or even what's going on with sensitive data. So these are challenges every business is facing, and really turning the light on and understanding what you have is the first step in doing that. Just quick, more numbers. I won't bore you too long on this, but the SANS and crowd research partners came out with more information off the back of all the data breaches that happened in 2015. But nearly 4 attacks per organization per year come from insiders. 45% of organizations can't tell if they've suffered a data breach. The fact that a data breach takes 200 days on average, so this is the average, it can take longer sometimes it could take less, but 200 days for a data breach to be detected. And another Verizon report showed that 85% of those the organizations don't know about the data breach themselves. It's from a third party, so usually a law enforcement agency, or it's just out there on the internet. And that's a trend that's going up. That 85%, well, that 15% of companies that can tell themselves they've had a data breach is getting smaller. So really understanding what's going on and auditing the activity in your data assets is even more critical for you to be able to detect a data breach in action and prevent it from happening, and 2, having the evidence and information to report on it when it's needed. Reputational damage is immeasurable. I mean, Sony, TalkTalk, all of these organizations, Yahoo as well, their share prices plummeted, and the reason is because people didn't really want to do business with them, and people just weren't sure that the business was going to be strong enough. So that's a big concern. So it's not just going to be the big fines that GDPR come in, it's also going to be the loss of revenue through your brand damage. And again, CEOs, CISOs are losing their jobs due to breaches. The Sony CEO it was no longer in his position. I think he got sidelined, but has now even left. Ashley Madison, Target, they lost their jobs. Even TalkTalk, the managing director, she recently stepped down to pursue other things. Whether she did that off her own back, I'm a little skeptical, but it's a face-saving way of, okay, this has happened, we now need to change the management structure and refresh our brand and build up our reputation again. So how can these data breaches happen? That's the next question, and it's because organizations can't really answer these fundamental questions. Who has access to the data? Who is accessing it? Where is the sensitive data? Where is it overexposed? All of that. Who are the data owners? Who makes these decisions around what should be going on with it? Where is that stale sensitive data? These are the questions that our framework help address very quickly and very efficiently. How would we address them? Well, the Varonis solution is a metadata framework. So we have 4 streams of metadata. One is understanding all of the accounts in the business. Who are the users? Who are the privileged accounts? Which are the service accounts? Who is the exec team? What are their accounts doing? And who are the regular users? And the reason we profile these accounts, and we do it automatically through user behavioral analytics and machine learning, is that everyone interacts with different data differently, and it gets you the kind of context you need when it comes to unusual behavior. For example, if a service account that normally works with application files is suddenly trawling through, the finance or HR or payroll folders or other areas of the business that wouldn't be normal, I'd want to know about it. We also understand the access controls, so how do these accounts have access to the data, and that's when we can start answering those critical questions. Who has access to this data, or more difficultly, and it's impossible without a solution like ours, is where does this account or user have access? The third stream of metadata is the context of the content, the sensitivity. So is this GDPR data? Who has access to it? What are they accessing it? Should they have access? And then understanding their audit activity. So again, this is GDPR data. I need to know who is accessing it, and then start to ask questions. How do they have access? Is it part of their job role? Should we be removing this access? That kind of information. And then baselining and understanding the typical behavior and how these users interact. Okay, these people interact with GDPR data typically like this, their peers work with it like this way, but all of a sudden I've got someone else who's accessing way more of it than they ever have before, or accessing it even though their peers don't access it. This is weird stuff. You want to have that visibility and understanding and context around what's going on in your data estate. I mentioned we do have an operational methodology, and it really is as simple as turning the lights on, understanding where is the sensitive data, understanding how people access that data and start to learn their behavior around it, and it's pretty much as simple as that. Then you want to start saying, right, where is the excessive access? Where do I have global access groups? Where do I have recommendations to reduce the access? And start locking down those permissions in a non-disruptive way to the business. and removing dangerous artifacts such as global access groups and simplifying the permission structures, identifying the data owners and empowering them to be able to make informed decisions around that data. And then sustaining our best practice policies around that. We've done the securing side, now we want to bring in the governance and have a framework to actually make that easy and not a pain to the business. Businesses won't adopt good governance if it's going to be disruptive to their operational, efficiency. And that's where you can automate things like get rid of the stale sensitive data, the GDPR data that we no longer need, let's de-risk it. Automate authorizations, make sure that when people request access, don't waste time with IT, go straight to the data owner and let them authorize it. Do entitlement reviews. Okay, these are the people that had access in the last 6 months. Do they still need access? Can I get back to privacy by design and least privileges and adopt that kind of, as I said, that business culture, but with a technical framework to actually put some momentum behind it. So I'm just going to quickly run through how that looks like with a framework. A couple of screenshots, but again, I'll be doing a very rapid demo at the end of this to kind of show you what it looks like dynamically. So first step, as I mentioned, and I'm going to keep saying it, map your environment. Something we'll be offering at the end, I didn't mention that's part of my job role as a systems engineer, is we do free data risk assessments, which aligns to Article 35 of the GDPR, known as a Data Protection Impact Assessment. You need to understand what is the risk of my data, what's where, who has access, what's going on. So yeah, map your environment is exactly what hackers do. They need to understand the kind of data they want to steal. First things they have to do is understand your environment, and you should too. If they're, if you're not doing it and they are, you're already behind the game. Understand where your sensitive data is. We have a classification framework, picking out of the box, go out and find EU citizen data and tell you where it is, who has access to it, and all the permissions around it. And then you want to start quantifying and understanding your risk profile. As I said, we do this as part of a data risk assessment, but with the solution, you can actually have these KPIs up and running and visible, so you can actually measure it, keep track of it, and evidence your success of compliance to the data protection authorities when it needs to be. If you need to understand in more details and run more detailed reports, again, you can do that from the UI. Here are the number of stale sensitive folders. You've got some at the bottom here, ES personal data protection. And DE, that's German and Swiss and German and Spanish and UK data protection. The information there that's stale, it's not been touched in however long. Do we still need it? Probably not. Let's de-risk it and delete it. So we have a data transport engine to just automatically find that as a policy and remove it from the system if it's no longer needed. But again, you can report on that to evidence where it is, or more importantly, where it isn't. And then turn on auditing. Really understand who are touching the emails, who are sending, sending emails, who are touching the files, who's marking emails as unread, what Active Directory changes are going, who's recently been added to the domain admins group. Do they really need to be a member of the domain admins? Understanding this kind of information, auditing it and evidencing it is critical for you to be able to track and know what's going on, and also in terms of a data breach situation, have the evidence at hand to go back and do the post-incident analysis and the forensics. But you don't really want to have to worry about having to do post-incident analysis and forensics after a data breach. You really want to alert on insider and cyber threat activity. We could do out of the box, we have a whole bunch of threat models which are aligned to known attack vectors. So if someone's attempting to do an attack vector, such as, their activity spike is weird, there's lots of access denied, they're accessing data that's atypical to that kind of account, such as service accounts being hijacked and going across file servers, or users are accessing more sensitive data than they've ever accessed before, or they're accessing data that's not part of their job role, they just happen to have access to it and they're just suddenly accessing all this information. Why are they doing this weird stuff? Let's alert to it and start to do some investigations. And all of these are aligned to the kill chain, something I'll come to later. So again, we have a great methodology and framework to help you understand exactly what's going on in your data assets and alert you to unusual activity. Of course, if you don't want to have all these alerts firing off, the best thing you can do is prevent. That is a bit of a longer journey, so that's why it's good to turn the lights on, start auditing and being alerted to stuff, whilst you take that longer term journey of building in your GDPR compliance up until the 25th of May 2018. So one is lock down sensitive data. We can help you lock that down in a non-disruptive way to the business. So because we audit everything, you can make changes within our UI, do some analysis in the background of who would be affected, let the business owner make a decision, and they will. Then you can just get rid of that access. You're getting to that privacy by design, locked down to least privileges, the utopia that we all wish for. But it's actually dangerous. No one really would do that without an ability to safely model the changes, and that's why permissions generally escalate and grow and become too open and too complex to really fix. We do have an automation engine where you can actually automatically remove global access groups and also fix broken ACLs. I mean, if you think about it, global access groups are a contradiction to privacy by design. They should not be on your file servers as much as they are, and they will be. And believe me, I've done so many risk assessments. Every organization I see has a ridiculous amount of global access groups on their file servers where they shouldn't. And sensitive data, especially GDPR data, is overexposed due to these global access groups when they shouldn't be. So that's part of the detection phase, something I recommend you take up, a free offering. But we can actually fix that. So we're not here just to say, you're in a mess, good luck. We're here to actually help you fix this and become compliant through that. Another important point is, what's the point in making all this effort to become GDPR compliant if you cannot evidence your success in doing so? It's a huge challenge for organizations. They say, we want to do something, we're not sure how, we are making an effort, and then the business says, or even more importantly, an auditor says, prove it, show me how you're doing this. So we have trend reporting. We can actually say, look, the number of sensitive folders with global access is going down, we're fixing this problem, it's great. We're doing the best thing we can to become compliant. So that's all you need to do. It's vastly important. Again, simplify your permission structures, areas where you know that are critical to the business. The automation engine's done 80% of the job. You now want to focus on those key critical areas where sensitive data resides, and you can actually simplify them in a non-disruptive way. And again, eliminate excessive access. I talk about user behavioral analytics, and it's not just around understanding who's doing bad things with the data. We can actually give you intelligent information around who should no longer have access. Andrew here is a member of, say, group finance, but he doesn't behave like the group finance members. He's somehow gained access to this group. Maybe he used to be a member of group finance, has changed roles. But no one's removed those access. So based on his behavior being different to the rest of the group, we can recommend you remove his access. So again, that's another piece of that can help you get to that privacy by design utopia. And there's a whole plethora of other things that we can help fix with, nested groups, inactive users, users that have got non-expiring passwords, understanding who they are and making sure that policies around that put in play. Because if you have a non-expiring password, you're giving a hacker an infinite amount of time to try and brute force that password. Or two, if they already have access to that password, they have an infinite amount of time to use it. It's never going to change. They have as much time as they want. So sustain. I've mentioned data owners. We give you, because we understand who's accessing the data, we give you a great insight into who you should be talking to in the business and nominating as a data owner, and giving you the tools to empower them to take that role on board. So that's important. We have an automation method or workflow for permissioning. So instead of authorization requests, entitlement reviews going through IT and becoming a drawn-out process, we can actually put the users and the data owners in direct contact with each other and have the data owners approve or decline access and review and re-entitle and recertify access to the data assets they're responsible for. This directly addresses that accountability by design piece that is within the GDPR underlying principles. And again, automating the removal of stale, sensitive, i.e. personal data for users and getting it off the system. Again, policy-driven, automated, makes it very simple. Or if you have a subject access request and someone says, show me my data, by the way, I want you to delete it, we can again go and find that data and remove it from the system. So, how to prepare for GDPR. As you can see here, this is a 12-point step written by the UK's ICO. So it's not this screenshot, which is a horrendous color of yellow, is not made by us, it's made by the ICO. But I just want to quickly go through the step and show you how our product stack kind of helps align that. Step one is awareness. You're on this webinar, so you're already taking care of that. You know that what GDPR is about and really who's responsible in the business for it and what you need to do. Number two is understand the information you hold. That would be where our free data risk assessment comes in, so you can actually shine a light on that and understand things. Some of the others here, like individual rights, communicating privacy, consent, children, they're policy things that your business will have to look at. What is your consent form legal jargon? How are you going to handle children? Unfortunately, we can't help you there, but we can help you with step 9, such as data breaches, and I think I've highlighted that already, through user behavioral analytics and real-time alerting to unusual activity, and just understanding how activity on your unstructured data and personal data assets is occurring. And then data protection by design, doing data protection impact assessments, that Article 35. Again, our framework can help you evidence the success of your compliance, and that's what point 10 really is about. How do you evidence your success? We give you a framework of reporting and quantifying that measure. And then data protection officers. The whole solution, as I'm sure you probably hopefully already realized, allows them, empowers them to have the information they need at their fingertips, to talk to the data owners about their data, and also evidence to the auditors exactly how compliant and successful you are, plus get all the information you need to prevent data breaches or evidence a data breach activity has occurred. So what happens in a data breach? And it's worth mentioning this. GDPR is 90 articles long. It talks about a whole bunch of rights and everything. But the reason why this has come along is because data breaches happen. And people, EU citizens, have been adversely affected by that. I don't think anyone can argue that that's the real crux of why GDPR has come into play. So let's focus on this. Whether it's an insider or an outsider or a cyber threat, everyone goes through these steps of a kill chain. And what that is a quantified phases of a data breach. The first phase is reconnaissance, as I mentioned at the start. Understand and map your environment. That's what a hacker does. That's what they try to do. Once they're in, they've got access to an account. They'll exploit vulnerabilities. They'll go through lateral movement, which is understanding what data they have access to. They'll escalate their privileges, and they'll finally exfiltrate the data. Now, an insider already has access, so they'll just do the lateral movement and exfiltration. Maybe they'll even try and escalate their privileges, but you still need to understand what's going on there. Here's a quick example of Sony. A whole bunch of information was discovered and breached. They were in there for months. C-level email correspondence was read, and this cost $15 million to clean up, and over the fiscal year, I think it cost them $35 million. That's without any fines taken into account. That's just for them to actually do the investigation and make things work. Here's an example of how that aligns to the kill chain. I don't think I'm going to go through it because I'm conscious I'm running out of time, but these things is what people have done, and really you need to understand that hundreds and hundreds of PII information and business documents and emails were breached, and people were in there for ages. And this is kind of the data, this is what we would have detected through our framework. So here we go, Article 33, notify a personal data breach within 72 hours to, say, the ICO for the UK. What does that mean for you? That means really you need to have an incident response plan. You need to put it down in pencil and paper, well, obviously digitally, what you would do with a data breach, and you need to practice it like you would a fire drill. And this is how you would evidence your compliance around this this article of the GDPR. How are you going to do Article 33? Right, this is our incident response plan, and we practice it, and this is how it works. We know it works. How would that look like with the Varonis solution? Well, again, alert to insider threats and activity. Understand what your threat responses over time, the top alerted users, the assets that are potentially under attack, the threat models, i.e. attack vectors being used, the devices they're hacking from. Just having this dashboard to give you that quick high-level visibility allows you then to drill down into, right, let's focus on some of these alerts. Right, we've got data exfiltration, abnormal behavior to excessive access. I now want to understand why that was unusual. Okay, I can see John Williams has done 24 times access sensitive data more than they ever have done before, plus it's more than his peers have been accessing data. That's weird. He's on a watch list, so we already realized that maybe he's looking to move company, he's been weird, he's been reprimanded, whatever it could be. First time he's accessed it from this device, never done that before. He's doing it outside of working hours, he's never really accessed this sensitive data. All of this is very high level for you to think, yeah, this is something serious, I should investigate further. And that's when you get down to the forensic logs, right? Which data was affected? Where was this? Okay, now I want to report this and go and investigate. And the important thing is, you could get to their desk and stop them, but the more, and that's great. But if you're too late, you've still got all the evidence to provide within 72 hours. You've detected it within 24 hours. which is great. That's a vast improvement on 200 days. But two, you have all the evidence at hand to provide to supervisory authority to say, look, we've been compliant, we've done our best, you know, in this situation, for whatever reason, all the layers of security fail, that governance, we can investigate that, but we've done everything we can, so we basically mitigated the risk of anything near a 2% fine or anything like that. But this is about really prevention, reducing the risk and understanding and making sure that you're as compliant as possible. And again, the best way to get started with that is with a free data risk assessment. So again, something someone of my responsibility, talk to your Bytes account manager, ask them if it's something you can do. It's a free offering. It's a great showcase for our technology, but more importantly, it's a document for you guys to really understand the risk and sort of the picture at play of your unstructured data, how GDPR compliant you are, and you can go back to the business and say, here's the situation today, what are we going to do to address this? And some of the takeaways that I want you to really think about is, well, what are the steps your organization going to take to address GDPR? How are you going to evidence that all the GDPR data is accounted for and well governed, and you've got data owners and privacy by design and accountability around it? How are you going to detect or prevent a data breach and provide that full forensics when it comes time to provide that information? How are you going to mitigate the risk from that happening or through global access groups, given that you probably all have limited resources? You know, the amount of data we hold is growing 50% year on year or more. Our IT teams don't. They probably grow by 1 or 2 people every few years, if that. So again, the resources are limited, and we really need to understand that very quickly and easily. And hopefully the framework you've seen today is a great way of doing that. And again, how is the business going to measure and evidence the success of your efforts to be compliant? It is a question that you need to ask the business, and hopefully you've seen a path forward to doing that here today. Now, if I have time, and I think I probably have 5 minutes, I'd like to very quickly just show you what a quick, how the framework can actually address GDPR. So let me quickly bring up one of my demo boxes. So here I have, this is the DataAdvantage user interface. I know it's the resolution is quite high, so I hope it's not too terrible. But here I've got all of my data assets. By the way, we help you with Office 365, Exchange, SharePoint, online and on-premise, obviously, Unix and Linux and NFS shares if you have NAS devices. So we actually monitor a huge range of unstructured data platforms, as well as what's going on in your directory services. But so I'm here, I'm looking at GDPR. The first thing I want to know is, where is my sensitive data? So I've done a data classification scan. We got out-of-the-box rules for, I think, 5 of the largest sovereign states of Europe. We've had them for years. We are actually working on a pan-GDPR rule that should be out, within the next quarter or so. But, I'm sure you'll agree, understanding where some GDPR data is now is better than not understanding where any of it is. And chances are, if UK, Swiss, French, German GDPR data is in certain locations, chances are similar data is in the same locations. So if we lock down this data now, we probably lock down other data we're not aware of yet until the GDPR rule comes out. I'm just going to focus on the UK Data Protection Act information. I could tick them all, but it's all European data. I want to quickly and easily focus on just this information. So through our user interface, within a minute, I'm automatically showing you, here's a list of where UK Data Protection Act is, and it's in SharePoint, it's in Office 365, and it's on my file servers. I can come down here, I can see I've got this file here, it's got 8 incidences of UK Data Protection Acts in the UK corporate finances. So I might quickly want to, just let me reload that. I want to look at, well, let's see who has access to that folder. So very quickly, while this UI refreshes, thank you. So let's come down, I've got the share and I've got the UK finances folder here, corporate finances. Who has access to that data? I double click. Over on the left, I can see I've got a global access group, so that's kind of worrying. First thing I want to do is get rid of that. So let's remove those permissions. I want to build those permissions back up. This is all happening in our user interface. This isn't happening in a live environment yet. So let's add permissions. I want to add the group finance. There he is. Double click. Okay. So group finance is just appearing there. They've got read rights. I actually do want them to do their job and modify data. So let's just quickly add that there. Okay, good. So we've just identified GDPR data that's globally accessible. I've now got it down to least privileges. All we have is administrators and the group finance folder. Let's simulate these changes and see how that would impact the live environment. Are there any users that may have been accessing group finance using the Everyone group that aren't a member of group finance? And these are important questions because there could be additional job roles that need access to that folder. We need to go back to the business, which is why it's important to understand who the data owners are, and say, look, we've discovered this, we're fixing this, we want to understand what the impact is. Apologies, my computer's a little slow, I've got far too many applications open. So let's have a quick look at the impact of that. So here I am, let's have a look at who would be impacted. Let's reload that. I can see I've got one employee, disgruntled Dan, who is one of our usual suspects, was accessing the corporate finance folder with GDPR sensitive data in, and he wasn't a member of group finance. So I'm starting to get a bit worried. I cannot fix global access instantly everywhere, as much as I'd love to, and we do have an automation engine to do that. The best thing I can do is start saying, right, I want to start monitoring everyone's behavior and alerting to unusual activities. Here's our data alert dashboard. Now I can see my threat models over time, again, all the usual users. Here's the kill chain and where they align to. Yeah, threat models being alerted. So I see disgruntled Dan is popping up again. He's actually #1 in my top alerted users, so that's worrying. Let's have a look at exactly what he's been doing. I can see where he is in the business. Unfortunately, my demo box doesn't have this data populated, but you actually do have the full contact details of their manager, which department they're in, all of that kind of stuff. So it gives you that context straight away of who they are in the business. Then I can see, like, I got abnormal activity to stale and sensitive data. So I'm like, well, let's have a look at exactly what he's been doing. Just going to quickly view these alerts, and we've got 3 minutes left. I can see, you know, he's been trying to access unusual activity, so he's access denied, so he's been, you know, lateral movement, trying to see where does he have access. And here we've got, if I expand this out a bit, you know, abnormal amount of access to sensitive data. So let's actually have a look at the events. What has he been doing? I want to do this, this investigation again. So quickly and easily, and just, again, this has taken me 5 minutes. I've, 1, identified where my sensitive data is. 2, remediated the global access groups on it. 3, I've identified a user who's been abnormally accessing that. And now I'm going through the forensics of what that looks like. So I can see, is he on a watch list? So he's not been worrying before, but he's actually triggered other alerts in the last 7 days. That's worrying. He's actually, yeah, so that's that bit here. I can see that 80% of the data was previously not touched, and this is the first time he's accessed this file server. So I'd be like, okay, I want to see more about that. I can actually understand that information now. So now I actually want to see, well, let's have a look. What are the alerted events? What has he been doing to see which is the data that's been affected? And again, this is where you get to the high-fidelity logs. I can see he's been accessing this files. Again, look, it's that corporate finance folder, and all these, you know, not all of them, but a lot of them contain personal and sensitive data for GDPR. I might then want to say, right, I need to now go and understand, go to his desk. I could go to disgruntled Dan's desk, and all I see is an empty desk and a spinning chair left. He's left the building. That means I now need to report on this. I can then quickly go back to my reports. I can put the alert ID in. You know, I think I've run out of time. You can see, sorry, here's the reporting log. I can then quickly and easily run the report, put the alert ID in, get all the events, the sensitivity of the data that was affected, and send that off to my data protection officer, who will know what to do with it regarding data protection, you know, notifying the data protection authority. So,
well, on the time, we've got a couple of minutes, because we've only got a couple of questions. So we've, good, I was going to say, we've got a couple of minutes if you just want to finish off what you were doing. So.
No, I'm good. Now I just need to squeeze through all of these and get back to my last slide. How embarrassing. But yeah, no, that's pretty much all finished there. But hopefully you saw that the framework that I was showing you allows you to understand your data, lock down the permissions, and get to that privacy by design in a very non-disruptive way to the business, understand who would be impacted, and that's through understanding who would be impacted, and how we can identify unusual activity, alert to it, and give you a very comprehensive and contextual UI to do the investigations and take remediation actions. So yeah, any questions?
Right, well, we have got a few. First things, thanks very much for that, William. That is awesome. Thank you for that. A really, really good run through of how Varonis can help with GDPR and GDPR in general. We've had a couple of little questions. One of them was, you know, is the product geared towards just Windows? Can it deal with Unix, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. I think you covered that off covering the NFS shares and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, we can give people more information on the broader aspects of everything it can cover, from SharePoint, OneDrive, all that kind of stuff. We had a question about foreign markets, so Japan, China, India, Taiwan. Can we do data discovery and that kind of stuff in different languages other than English, basically?
Yes, we do support multiple languages. I can't remember the comprehensive list off the top of my head, unfortunately.
That's okay. So the answer is yes. Again, more information available to get the specific list, basically. Yeah. Another question. I don't know if can you see the questions pop out? It might be easier if you read that one.
Is that in the chat? No.
No, there's actually a separate questions pop out. Don't worry. We've got. Can we use the software to help with other elements such as international transfers, legitimate purposes, etc., etc., as well as GDPR? Was one of the other questions. I'm not sure I understand that one. Do you?
Sorry, I was just trying to find the question, but I don't. So repeat that again. So how can we help with international transfers?
International transfers and legitimate purposes, etc.
So I guess that would be whether personal data is being transferred internationally and whether the reason for it to be transferred beyond, say, EU borders or being from one state. So wherever an organization resides, and that will have certain controls in place, and this is the idea, of course. So say I've got a partner in the US and they have EU citizen data, but I've made sure that they're certified to be GDPR compliant, kind of thing. And there's a trust between us for me to transfer data to that branch office, and they transfer it back, and we're evidencing that that data is being moved over, there's the right for it to be transferred, and that it's properly being protected under the various sort of extraterritoriality articles related to GDPR. In one sense, I guess, yes, if you know that using us to evidence that whilst the data is overseas or with a third party, it's being evidenced, but I think I'd need to have more context around that use case to be able to say yes or no. It can be quite dependent. But we can evidence that data has been collected, and you can say, look, this data is being moved from our business side, and you can report on that.
Okay, no, fair enough. Will the UK Data Protection Act be replaced by GDPR? Well, who knows? I think the likelihood is, I mean, even if the UK Data Protection Act isn't directly replaced by GDPR, I'm sure you hopefully agree with me on this, William, then GDPR will still apply if we're going to deal with Europe, which we will be, because they're our biggest trading partner. And the likelihood is that the UK is just going to adopt GDPR in actuality, if not by name, but probably lock, stock and barrel as part of the Brexit negotiations anyway, isn't it? I think is what we all agree, isn't it?
Yeah, so with, I think Theresa May, or not Theresa May herself, but her lackeys and the government, say, have written a white paper that came out in the last few weeks or last month, which essentially says that we will be adopting GDPR, and if post-Brexit, we will have an equivalent UK law of equivalent protection. Same as Switzerland does. Switzerland is not part of Europe, but its data protection laws closely mirror the European laws because they do so much business with Europe. And the UK would do the same. Another element when people talk about Brexit is, out of the negotiations, most UK citizens can opt in to remain EU citizens, and also the legislation refers to natives. It doesn't really refer to EU citizens, so it can apply to non-EU native, like natural-born people, but people that live there or are effectively EU residents that have EU rights by being resident there. So there's a whole bunch of the legal language means that yes, GDPR will still be very much present for a long time to come, and it will affect all businesses in the UK. So just to agree with you, and I think it will essentially replace, or it will override. So the UK Data Protection Act is based on the Data Protection Directive from the EU. We had one. I don't know how much of one we had in the past, but the current legislation that is UK Data Protection Act is directed by the Data Protection Directive, and as I mentioned at the start, GDPR is replacing that. It's pan-European, so that will be the overriding data protection law, and it will take precedence over sovereign state data protection laws, and that's my understanding.
Yep, agreed. You're developing the GDPR classification you mentioned, obviously, for within within Varonis. It's just a quick question. They're assuming that you will be providing additional classifications as additional things come out on top of that. I think the answer is you've already been doing that. It's just GDPR is wrapping it all together, and other stuff will be added in over time, won't it?
All common, or not common, all regulatory. Widespread is the word I want to use. Widespread regulatory regulations. Sorry, you know what I mean. Such as PCI compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley, American HIPAA, all of those rules we have out of the box. We have as many of them out of the box as possible, so you can just turn them on quickly and easily. If you want to fine-tune them and make them more, pertinent to your business, or you want to create your own rules that are pertinent to your business, you can do that. But what we've tried to make it as easy for the end user and the organizations as possible to get up and running and sort of targeting this information and starting to put security and governance practices around it.
Thank you all. So we've got one more. And this is, we've tripped over this one before, and this is for me very much a politically how you spin it question, to be honest. But is not monitoring people's activity in violation of data protection. We've certainly had these problems in Germany before. For me, the answer to that question is we're not monitoring their activity. We're monitoring what people are doing with our data. It's a completely, you're looking at it from the wrong side of the mirror. But I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, William.
Well, I think Germany is a great example, and I think it is only pertinent to Germany. So the German Works Council, and it's not, I think it's Germany, Austria, and maybe even parts of Switzerland that have this. They're very, very tight personal data protection laws, and I think they're really they're part of the. Germany has been part of the drivers for why GDPR is so strict and has quite strict rules. The UK has been a balancing act in trying to give people wiggle room and making it a bit more reasonable. In Germany, you're not allowed to, so in the UK, any data that we send on a corporate email or data we save on a corporate asset is the business's data in one sense. We may send an email, but really because it's owned by the business, they're allowing us to use these services of the business. The business takes final ownership of it, even though it contains our personal data. In Germany, personal data means personal data. So if I send a personal email on the corporate email, say gateway, the business is not allowed to read that. That's an infringement of my personal data protection rights. So what Varonis can do, we can actually selectively turn off certain areas, and this is what we do in the DAC region, the German, Austria, Swiss region, is we say, okay, we won't monitor your home drives, but everything else is corporate assets. We're going to monitor that. These kinds of things. So you can actually granularly deselect areas if you don't want to monitor them to help those personal rights, but you should be auditing and monitoring all corporate assets, especially when it comes to things like GDPR and stuff.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, William. Right. That is the last of our questions. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for attending today. It's been a really good turnout for this webinar, so we're really, really pleased. Remember, there is the survey at the end for you to fill in and complete, etc. And again, thanks very much for attending. We'll see you all soon at our next event. William, thank you very much for your time.
No, thanks very much for the opportunity, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.